One of the recommended initiatives of transition is transport. Peak oil price rises are all part of a downward spiral for our transport needs. So what can we look for in the way of solutions? I'm here in the south of Europe with fellow permaculture enthusiast James. He's developed his very own understanding and his very own solution, and he uses waste vegetable oil which has already been used, thus recycling it. This falls into the category of being carbon neutral.
Okay, well, for starters, what does this term carbon neutral mean? Now, I run my cars on vegetable oil which comes from sunseed plants, and I've got sunseed plants over here. These plants are here because about 6 weeks ago I planted a series of little seeds just like that. So quite clearly a huge amount of material has appeared from somewhere to create these wonderful entities. Where's it come from? Okay, well, the soil of course provides a wide range of minerals and water, which is a fair amount of the plant. But there is actually a huge amount of carbon in these plants. So where did the carbon come from? Well, as it happens, it actually came out of the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide through a process called photosynthesis. Very clever stuff. Photosynthesis is also responsible for, and this is really neat, for extracting the energy from the sun and storing it up. And in fact it stores it up in very convenient stuff for us, which is the things like vegetables, fruit, salad leaves, all the things that we need. So carbon dioxide is taken out of the atmosphere via photosynthesis. It deposits the carbon in the structure and releases the oxygen back into the atmosphere. So if I squeeze oil from these seeds here and then burn it in my car, well, I'm putting back into the atmosphere only a tiny fraction of the total amount of carbon that actually came out during the process of the plant growth. So I'm at the very least carbon neutral. And if I compost the rest of this, thus locking all that carbon up as fertile soil, well, I've got to be positively carbon plus. Whereas, when I burn diesel fuel, I release that carbon up into the atmosphere, but I never put it back. So, carbon negative, totally.
So James, is this suitable for any car? Petrol, diesel?
Well, if you stick vegetable oil in a petrol car, you'll be very sorry. This is diesel cars only. Absolutely. Quick word about the law, because in quite a few places the use of vegetable oil on public highways has been made illegal. Don't ask me why. So, if that kind of thing concerns you, you should check that one out before you go any further. Now, vehicle-wise, what you're really looking for is a vehicle with what's called an indirect fuel injection system. These vehicles were current up until about the beginning of the 90s, so pre-90s and you're usually pretty safe.
So this has huge implications for keeping old vehicles in use.
Absolutely, but it's not just the fuel thing. With old cars, they can still be repaired DIY. Modern cars, forget it. Just get yourself one of these things. This is a manual for the Merc, and you're away.
So let's get down to the nitty-gritty and show us what you're actually doing, James.
Okay, what I'm about to describe to you applies only to locations where you never ever get frost. Plus, I've only had real experience with two cars, a 1987 1.6 Golf diesel and a 1978 2-litre 123 series Merc. Okay? Okay, well, I do two things, both of which are designed to make the veg oil flow more easily. First thing I do is I actually put this thing on. This is a heat exchanger which heats the fuel up before it gets to the pump and uses the engine water coolant as the heat source. The other thing I do is in January and February here when overnight temperatures might get as low as 5 degrees and it's harder to start the vehicle in the morning, I dilute it with diesel about 20%, and that solves the problem. What about this thing? It's a very simple piece of kit. It's homemade, and the materials cost about 20 euros. So what have we got? This is the heat exchanger, which is just a tube within a tube. These pipes here actually are the intake and outlet for the hot water, and this tube here is the fuel, in and out this way. So what have we got going on in here? Couldn't be simpler. Off with the insulation, and there you have it. A tube within a tube. This is water in, water out, fuel out, fuel in, and it's just a question of getting the right size piping and soldering it up. Now what I should say is that you should go counterflow, which is to say the fuel's coming this way, you want the water going that way, which increases the heat exchange. So regarding the hot water in and out, the in I break into the pipe that comes out of the water pump that feeds the heating system in the car, and this one is actually locked into the pipe that comes back to the engine from the heating system. Easy. Now just a quick word about the extra fuel filter. You need this because the diesel fuel actually is quite impure and leaves deposits on the whole fuel system right from the tank through to the injectors, and unfortunately the vegetable oil cleans it. So once you start using the veg oil, you get all this deposit removed and put back into the fuel, so you need to stop it getting through. This does a perfect job. Now these things cost about 5 euros a piece, and you need to, well, what I do is I have one in the car ready to change whenever this one gets blocked. You of course see it getting black as time goes by, and it's very easy to catch it before the car starts going chug chug chug. So basically put it in line and you're away. The first one will probably last for about 300 kilometers when the maximum amount of crud's coming through. Over about 4,000 kilometers when there should be almost no deposits getting onto the filter. There you go.
So given the fact that we're using used cooking oil here, surely there must be some way that it has to be cleaned up itself.
Absolutely right, John. I filter it. And this is the key component in the filter game, the filtration cloth, which filters down to an incredible 1 micron. That's really clean oil. Next comes the filtration hardware. So here's the vessel that I've made to contain the filter cloth. It's just a sort of, I don't know how big the barrel is, but it's a barrel I found in the street. I chopped it in half. I then stuck a tap in it, and I placed this piece of metal full of holes here, which of course leaves a space for the oil to flow out once it's been filtered. Secure the cloth around the vessel, I see, like this, and you're away. I use one of the containers that the oil comes in to collect the clean oil, like that. Probably the biggest downside of using the veg oil is the fact that whatever you do, or whatever I do, the stuff seems to get everywhere, and it's pretty gungy stuff. And just to give you the idea of what I mean, this here is one of the clips that I hold the filter paper onto the receptacle vessel, but if I come close you can see just how crappy this is. Can you see that? Yes, I think so. It congeals and then sticks like the best glue in the world, and it's everywhere. So that, I'm afraid, is the downside of this process, but it's, you know, it's not that much of a cross to bear when you consider what the upside is. I collect the oil either in 25 litre vessels or ones like this, which are the 5 litre ones. Now the first thing I do is I actually leave them to stand for anything between a week and 2 weeks. The reason for this is because what actually happens is that much of the impurity settles down to the bottom. If you look here closely, I think you can see that there's a line of sort of material down here, which is what used to be here, and is separated out. Then when it comes to pouring the stuff into the filter, I pour it very carefully, very gently, and as soon as that gunge starts to come through, I stop. So that what I'm doing is I'm putting through the filtration system only the very cleanest of the oil. What I do next is I actually, all the stuff that's remaining, I put into another vessel where it again separates out, giving me more vegetable oil from the gunge. Pure, almost clean oil. But you can see the gunge starting to move towards the exit. So you'll see that as soon as the crap starts to appear, there, leave it again. Wave.
Thanks for that, James. That's really interesting. So, if you're interested in transport as part of your initiative for transition, why not start a transport group?